Drew, I'm going to start with Alabama Crimson Tide. To me, is this Nick Saban's best coaching job yet in Tuscaloosa? That is 17 years. So that is a big question. Drew, I'm going to say it is one of his best. I don't know if it is his best, but I think it's one of the best, top three, when you consider Alabama, two new coordinators, both sides of the ball. Tommy Rees coming over from Notre Dame, Kevin Steele coming over from Miami. A lot of question marks about both those hires. The season kind of gets off to a rough start. You lose to Texas week 2 by 10 plus points. South Florida the next week. You bring in Ty Simpson. You bring in Tyler Buckner. You don't know where Jalen Milroe sits. Drew, they go back to the drawing board after that game. They have been really good. Big performance against a top 15 team in LSU. Beat them 42-28 at home. Hold LSU Jaden Daniels, who was knocked out of that game in the fourth quarter with 11 minutes left, to only 7 points in the second half. And Ryan McGrady, I know he's not here, but I'm going to read off some McNuggies with the win. How about this? Head coach Nick Saban surpassed former Georgia head coach Vince Dooley for the second most SEC wins at one school with 202. Saban trails only former Alabama legendary coach Paul Bear Bryant with 224 SEC victories. He's also 2 wins away from 10-plus wins for the 16th consecutive season. Absolutely wild stat. And Drew, you talked about it. We're going to talk about recruiting here in a second. 74 blue chip players on the 2023 roster. That's the most in the FBS. 11 blue chip commitments in the 2024 class. 10 top 247 commitments in the same class as well. Drew, I kind of think about it. It's crazy to read the stat of 74 blue chip prospects. That's more than anybody else in the country. And I look back at some of these Alabama teams, and for some reason I think to myself, I know they're talented, but I don't know if they're as talented as they have been in the past. That's kind of the other thing that kind of jumps up to me. Then you think about Jalen Milroe. How about some of the names at the quarterback position? Bryce Young, Mac Jones, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts, all since 2016. So, Drew, you enter Jalen Milroe. This is the first time in a long time. The quarterback room's been a little bit shaky. I mean, this guy at 72, man, I don't think he's running out of gas at all. It's pretty remarkable.
Rounding into form is kind of the word that comes to mind for me. Early on in the season, all these questions about Alabama and the quarterback position. Now, in the thick of the schedule, getting closer and closer to when it really counts, right? Potential SEC championship game, potential college football playoff. I mean, I think it says a lot about the guys on his staff in that building. I mean, you mentioned Jalen Milroe's monster game. Tyler Van Dyke, the Miami quarterback, remember the rumors when it seemed like the Crimson Tide were going to get him? It's like, why were we doubting the Empire, right? Darth Vader there, Nick Saban. So I would agree with that for your one little thing.
Next 3 at Kentucky, Tennessee, Chattanooga, and then Auburn to round it out for Alabama, who is firmly in the mix for a CFP. Drew, I kind of tie this one little thing to if they can win the West in the SEC, go to the SEC championship. If you would have asked me in the beginning of the year if this team could match up with Georgia, I think we all know they have the skill. The quarterback position was the biggest question mark. The way Jalen Milroe is playing, I think Alabama certainly has a shot. They beat LSU 42-28, and if you did not watch this game, I think you would have a newfound respect for Jalen Milroe if you go back and you turn on the highlights. How about Jalen Milroe? Alabama combined to run for a season high 288 yards and 6 touchdowns. Milroe, the first quarterback in school history to rush for 4 touchdowns in a single game, career high 3 touchdowns in the first half, 155 rushing yards, most by an Alabama quarterback since Tyler Watts in 2001, 5th most all-time by a quarterback. Alabama's defense, like I said earlier in the show, only allowed 7 points in the second half, which marked the 7th time across its 9 games this season that the Tide has allowed 7 or fewer second half points. So you got to give a lot of credit to Kevin Steele, Alabama, that defense adjusting. Drew, this game was back and forth, especially in the first half. LSU drove down the field with less than a minute and 20, tied it up. Then come out in the second half, they scored, they go up by 7. The Jaden Daniels injury plus the turnover, it kind of got away quickly in the fourth quarter from LSU. But, Drew, like I said, I think just kind of praising Alabama for being in this spot when after that South Florida game, it was looking pretty grim. And I don't know if Alabama is going to end up in the CFP. They got to win their next 3, like we said, very doable. They control their own destiny in the West, and then more than likely a matchup with Georgia to come in the SEC championship. But I think if you were to ask any Alabama fan, At this point in time, if you were to be in this position with an opportunity that the West runs through you and you got to beat Georgia, who, let's face it, Georgia is arguably the best team in the country, but I don't know if they're that same team in the last 2 years, right? And I think that's pretty fair to say. Like, who is that elite team? And I guess what I'm saying is the way Alabama's playing, I think that's a winnable game. So if you're an Alabama fan, Drew, right now, I think you feel pretty good about going into the later part of November.
So let's go back to that USF game, right? We were kind of wondering what's going on with the Crimson Tide. And then my takeaway, getting the baton from you, I was not able to catch this game because it's impossible to watch college football in Europe and in Germany. Coop, I like sat down. It was like 5 p.m. I'm like, all right, big noon slate here. I'm gonna be able to watch all these games. Nothing on TV. I think billiards was on TV. Then someone told me you got to watch it on your phone or whatnot. I look at the visitors list for Alabama LSU, and this feels like an Alabama LSU visitors list of old. I mean, it was kind of a who's who. I know they had a few guys in on officials. Elias Williams, the Missouri defensive line commit, who has had an excellent season here in the state of Florida. Also had Solomon Williams on an unofficial visit. But really, to me, what jumps out is Alabama, the underclassmen that showed up and were in Tuscaloosa. Alabama right now in the 2024 cycle has the number 5 recruiting class. Well, look at 2025. They're number 2 right now, and there was a ton of guys that we love in that 2025 cycle that were in the stands watching Alabama take care of LSU. I'm talking about Naeem Offord, our number 1 corner, Caleb Cunningham, wide receiver, 5-star wide receiver for us, Micah DeBose, 5-star offensive lineman that's committed to Georgia. And then you had Carter Lowe, top 247 tackle out of Ohio. I don't know. I just kind of like look at this recruiting and what they're doing in 2025. And then there were some 2026 guys there we like as well. Tyler Atkinson, one of our top players. And it has me wondering, does Nick Saban isn't going anywhere. What is he telling these guys, right? Hey, I'm gearing up for a few more runs, because I do think that 2025 class are also trending for Zion Grady, the 5-star defensive lineman. A few crystal ball picks in for him. I mean, Alabama isn't going anywhere. And I think where the strength on the recruiting front for them sits right now is in 2025. And I think they were able to supplement that class this weekend, winning in front of those guys. I think that's going to go a long way.
I think the other thing that's good for Alabama, especially this year, now you've seen the progress on the field, continuity, right, within the system. We talk about the coaching turnover. I think that's a point that we don't elaborate on enough. Now, Tommy Rees can certainly have another successful season next year, and I could see that being a hot name. But Kevin Steele has kind of been there, done that, right? So now, almost on, I don't know, a second or third cup of coffee with Alabama, I don't think he's going anywhere either. So, Drew, the question remains, how much longer can Nick Saban do this? It's kind of funny. Every year we talk about, is he losing his fastball? You see the game against South Florida. You saw the game against Texas. See some things happen that haven't happened in his 17-year tenure in Tuscaloosa, and you start to wonder a little bit, all right, maybe the foundation's getting a little bit shaky. And then you see him respond the way that they do, which is why I kind of brought up. I mean, this is one of his best coaching jobs, especially with what they have at the quarterback position. And that's not taking anything away from Jalen Milroe. It just goes the roller coaster that they've been on. I don't know, Drew. What do you think? Another 4 or 5 years out of the greatest of all time?
He just turned 73 on Halloween, correct?
72 or 73. That's when we would need a McGrady fact check. Wikipedia this morning said 72, but I might be wrong.
I think his birthday is Halloween. I do think that. I don't know. I'm just saying, if he understands and knows the person, what these recruits are like in 2024 and 2025, I don't know, 3-4 years. I don't know what he's got in the tank. I feel like we go through this dance every single year. All right, is he going to ride off into the sunset? But I do think the talent that they have committed over the next few years is going to be good enough to make it to the college football playoff, especially with that field expanding.
Will be a day that will be celebrated, trust me, throughout the SEC conference when that day comes, but I don't think it's coming anytime soon. We got a couple more years, like Drew said.